I'm Audrey, 34, a devoted mother to my 5-year-old daughter, Lily. My relationship with my mother-in-law, Margaret, has always been strained, but nothing prepared me for what she did. She deliberately exposed Lily to chickenpox without my permission, believing in natural immunity, despite Lily's compromised immune system from a recent illness. The consequences were devastating. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you want more family drama stories that teach valuable life lessons. My background as a healthcare professional has always shaped my worldview. As a nurse practitioner at Memorial Hospital, I've seen firsthand the benefits of modern medicine and the importance of vaccinations. Science and evidence-based care aren't just my profession, they're my passion, which makes what happened even more heartbreaking. I met my husband James 8 years ago at the hospital where we both worked. He was a rising star in hospital administration, always impeccably dressed with a warm smile that could light up the dreary hospital corridors. Our connection was immediate. We bonded over late-night coffees in the cafeteria and shared dreams of building a family founded on love and mutual respect. Our romance moved quickly despite warnings from several of my colleagues. "His mother has her claws deep in him," my friend Sarah cautioned during my bridal shower. "I've met her at the hospital fundraiser. She's the type who thinks her son hung the moon, and no woman will ever be good enough." I laughed it off, then convinced that our love could overcome any family challenge. How naive I was. We married in a beautiful spring ceremony after dating for just 10 months. James's mother, Margaret, attended with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. During our first dance, I caught her watching us with an expression I couldn't quite place. It wasn't until years later that I recognized it as possession. When Lily was born, our joy was immeasurable. James cried as he held our daughter for the first time, this tiny bundle with his nose and my eyes. "She's perfect," he whispered, and in that moment, everything felt right in the world. The harmony was short-lived. Margaret arrived at the hospital with a suitcase announcing she would be staying with us for as long as needed to help with the baby. Without consulting me, she had already arranged a month's leave from her part-time job at a local health food store. The first red flag waved vigorously when she began questioning every decision I made for my newborn. "Formula is basically poison," she declared, watching me prepare a bottle when my milk supply struggled to keep up with Lily's needs. "In my day, we used goat's milk with a bit of molasses. Much more natural." James would gently intervene. "Mom, we're following the pediatrician's recommendations." But these confrontations became a pattern, with Margaret always positioning herself as the authority on childcare, despite having raised just one child over 30 years ago. The conflicts continued as Lily grew. When we sleep-trained Lily using the pediatrician's recommended method, Margaret accused us of neglect. When we introduced solid foods according to modern guidelines, she insisted we were doing it all wrong. Every decision became a battlefield, with James increasingly caught in the middle. We established boundaries that Margaret constantly tested. No unannounced visits, no contradicting our parenting decisions in front of Lily, no unauthorized treats or activities. Simple rules that she viewed as personal attacks on her grandmotherly rights. James struggled with his role as mediator. "She means well," he would say after particularly tense encounters. "She just loves Lily so much." And I understood that. I even empathized with her desire to be involved in her grandchild's life. But there's a vast difference between involvement and interference. I tried so hard to maintain peace for family harmony. Sunday dinners at her house, holiday traditions incorporated from her family, photo albums and video calls when we couldn't visit in person. I believed that with enough goodwill and patience, we could forge a respectful relationship. Then came our first major confrontation when Lily was 18 months old. We had allowed Margaret to babysit overnight while we attended a wedding. Upon returning, I noticed Lily had developed an unusual rash on her chest and back. Alarmed, I questioned Margaret. "Just a little lavender and tea tree oil in her crib to help her sleep?" she admitted, seeming genuinely surprised by my reaction. "I've been using essential oils for decades. They're completely safe." Except they weren't for my daughter, who developed a significant allergic reaction requiring a steroid cream and antihistamines. James finally confronted his mother, directly extracting a reluctant promise that she would respect our parenting decisions going forward. A fragile truce followed. Margaret became more careful, at least outwardly. James believed she had learned her lesson, and Lily continued to flourish into a bright, curious toddler whom everyone adored. We thought the worst was behind us. We were wrong. Everything changed when Lily turned 4. What started as unusual fatigue and recurrent infections led to a diagnosis that shattered our world: a rare autoimmune condition that would require immunosuppressive treatment. The specialist explained that Lily's immune system was attacking her own tissues, and the medications needed to control this would leave her vulnerable to infections that other children could easily fight off. I threw myself into researching her condition, consulting with specialists across the country, joining parent support groups, and creating a treatment plan that would give Lily the best quality of life while managing her symptoms. James was my rock throughout this process, attending every appointment, asking insightful questions, and holding me when the weight of it all became too much. Margaret, however, had a very different reaction. "Autoimmune diseases are just the body's way of telling you something is wrong with her diet," she declared after the diagnosis. "All these chemicals in processed foods plus those vaccines you insisted on giving her. Her little body is rebelling." I bit my tongue until it nearly bled. "Margaret, this is a genetic condition. It has nothing to do with her diet or vaccines." She shook her head with the confidence of someone who had spent hours on questionable health websites. "You medical people are all the same, always looking for complicated answers when the solution is simple. Get her off gluten and dairy, give her these supplements I found, and watch her heal naturally." The tension in our family escalated rapidly. James, who had previously tried to see both sides, began to more openly side with me regarding Lily's medical decisions. This shift created a new dynamic that Margaret clearly resented. "Your wife has turned you against me," I overheard her telling James one evening when she thought I was putting Lily to bed. "I raised you without all these fancy doctors and medications, and you turned out just fine." Her passive-aggressive behavior intensified. Each visit came with a new book about natural healing or a printout about the dangers of pharmaceutical companies. She would make comments within Lily's earshot. "Grandma knows you'd feel better with some fresh air instead of all those pills." It was exhausting and dangerous. Then came Lily's first major flare-up. One morning, she woke unable to get out of bed, her joints so swollen and painful that she cried when we tried to help her to the bathroom. We rushed to the emergency room where she was admitted immediately and stayed for 5 terrifying days. Witnessing Lily's suffering seemed to temporarily shock Margaret into reality. She saw her granddaughter hooked up to IV medications, watched the pain in her face, observed the skilled medical team working tirelessly to bring her inflammation under control. For a brief period, Margaret stopped pushing her natural remedies and simply brought Lily's favorite stuffed animals and read her stories during hospital visits. I dared to hope that this experience had finally helped her understand the seriousness of Lily's condition. That hope was misplaced. Within weeks of Lily's discharge, Margaret discovered an online community of anti-vaccination advocates who reinforced her existing beliefs and added new, more dangerous ones to her arsenal. She began forwarding articles about children cured of autoimmune diseases through extreme diets, unregulated supplements, and the avoidance of all conventional medicine. Meanwhile, Lily's doctor had been crystal clear: due to her immunosuppressive medications, she must avoid exposure to infectious diseases. A simple cold could become pneumonia. Chickenpox could be life-threatening. We made the difficult decision to homeschool Lily temporarily to reduce her exposure risks, especially since there had been outbreaks of preventable diseases in several local schools due to declining vaccination rates. "You're turning her into a bubble child," Margaret complained when we explained our decision. Children need to be exposed to germs to build strong immune systems. Not children on immunosuppressants, I explained for what felt like the 100th time. Lily's medication prevents her from mounting a normal immune response. What would give another child the sniffles could send her to the ICU. She nodded and said she understood, but her eyes held a stubborn gleam that should have warned me. Instead, I interpreted her apparent acceptance as progress. We entered a period of relative calm that gave me false hope that Margaret was finally respecting our boundaries and accepting the reality of Lily's medical needs. That calm before the storm lasted about 6 months. The first reports of a chickenpox outbreak in our community came through the school district's email alert system. Though Lily wasn't attending in person, we remained on their list to stay informed about health concerns. The email stated that cases had been confirmed in 3 elementary schools across town. James and I immediately increased our vigilance. We limited Lily's activities to outdoor spaces with minimal contact with other children. We reinforced hand-washing protocols. We explained to Lily in age-appropriate terms why we needed to be extra careful for the next few weeks. Then came Margaret's surprising offer. An important work conference was approaching one I'd been looking forward to for months. It would require me to be away for 3 days, something I hadn't done since Lily's diagnosis. "Let me watch Lily while you're gone," Margaret suggested during Sunday dinner at her house. "James will be working, and it would give me some special grandmother time with my favorite girl." I hesitated, but James encouraged me. "You should go, honey. You've been looking forward to this conference all year. Mom has been really good lately, and I can check in during my lunch breaks." Against my better judgment, I agreed. The conference represented not just professional development, but a brief return to my identity beyond being Lily's mother and medical advocate. 3 days of adult conversations about healthcare advancements, rather than medication schedules and symptom journals. I prepared meticulously. A binder contained Lily's medication schedule dosage instructions, emergency contacts, and detailed information about her condition to give any healthcare provider if needed. I organized her pills in labeled daily containers. I prepared her favorite meals and froze them with simple reheating instructions. "This is quite the operation manual," Margaret commented as I walked her through everything. "I raised a child too, you know." "I know you did," I said carefully, "but Lily has special medical needs that make things more complicated." The morning of my departure, I knelt to Lily's level and held her small hands in mine. "You be good for Grandma, okay? Follow all the rules about taking your medicine and washing hands." "I will, Mommy," she promised, her blue eyes solemn. "And when you come back, can we have a special movie night?" "Absolutely," I assured her, pushing down the anxiety churning in my stomach. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. As I pulled out of the driveway, Margaret and Lily waved from the porch. I still remember that image clearly. My beautiful daughter's trusting smile, completely unaware of the danger her grandmother was about to put her in. The conference was everything I'd hoped for: professional stimulation, networking opportunities, and the latest research in my field. Each evening, I called to check in. Margaret reported that everything was fine. Lily was taking her medications, eating well, and they were having a wonderful time together. "We went to the park today," Margaret mentioned during our second call. "The park?" I questioned, immediately concerned. "Which park? Were there many children there?" "Just the neighborhood one," she said dismissively. "Don't worry so much, Audrey. Lily had a great time on the swings." I reminded her about the chickenpox outbreak and the importance of avoiding crowds, and she assured me they had kept their distance from others. I chose to believe her, needing to trust that she wouldn't deliberately endanger her granddaughter. When I returned home 3 days later, I knew immediately something was wrong. Lily was unusually lethargic, complaining that she felt itchy and hot. When I checked her temperature, she had a low-grade fever of 100.2 degrees F. Alarmed, I examined her more closely and found the telltale spots beginning to form on her chest and back. "Margaret," I said, my voice shaking with both fear and rage. "Why does Lily have a rash?" Margaret was arranging cookies on a plate in the kitchen, preparing an after-school snack as if nothing was amiss. She glanced up casually. "Oh, it's just chickenpox. Nothing to worry about, all kids get it." The room seemed to tilt around me. "What do you mean, just chickenpox? How was she exposed?" That's when Margaret revealed with shocking casualness that she had deliberately arranged a chickenpox playdate with her friend's infected grandchildren during my absence. "Ellen's grandkids came down with it last week," she explained, continuing to arrange cookies as if discussing the weather. "When she mentioned it, I thought it was the perfect opportunity. Better for Lily to get it now than when she's older. I had it as a child. James had it. Natural immunity is so much better than all those artificial vaccinations." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Margaret, Lily is immunocompromised. Her doctor specifically said chickenpox could be life-threatening for her." Margaret finally stopped with the cookies, her expression hardening. "That doctor has you completely brainwashed. Children have been getting chickenpox for generations without all this fuss. A little calamine lotion and oatmeal baths, and she'll be fine in a week." There was no time to argue. I wrapped Lily in a blanket, grabbed her emergency medical information, and rushed her to the car. On the way to the emergency room, I called James, my voice breaking, as I explained what his mother had done. "She did what?" His disbelief matched my own. "That's impossible. She knows about Lily's condition." "She did it deliberately, James. She called it a playdate. She thinks natural chickenpox is better than the vaccine." There was a long silence before he spoke again. His voice hardened in a way I'd never heard before. "I'm leaving work now. I'll meet you at the hospital." The emergency room doctor's face grew increasingly grave as I explained Lily's condition and the exposure. "This is a potentially serious situation," he said. "Given her immunocompromised state, we need to admit her immediately and start antivirals. We'll also need to adjust her immunosuppressant medication, which complicates things further." As they prepared Lily for admission, I watched my daughter's small body already developing more spots by the hour, her normally bright eyes now dull with fever. The rage I felt toward Margaret was overwhelming, but I pushed it aside to focus on what Lily needed from me: calm reassurance and advocacy. James arrived as they were transferring Lily to the pediatric ward. His face was ashen as he took in our daughter's condition. "The doctor says they're starting her on high-dose acyclovir." I explained medical terminology, a comforting refuge in the chaos. "They're worried about her developing complications like pneumonia or encephalitis." Before James could respond, Margaret appeared at the entrance to the ward, her expression a mixture of concern and defensive indignation. James stiffened beside me. "They wouldn't let me in until family arrived," she explained, moving toward Lily's bed. "How's my precious girl doing?" James physically blocked her path. "Don't come any closer," he warned, his voice low but intense. "You've done enough damage." Margaret looked genuinely surprised. "Damage? Don't be ridiculous. Every child gets chickenpox. Your generation is so overprotective." "Mom, the doctor just told us Lily could die from this," James hissed, mindful of Lily possibly overhearing. "Do you understand that die because of what you did?" Margaret's certainty finally wavered. "That's just them being dramatic. Medical people always assume the worst." I couldn't contain myself any longer. "This isn't a difference of opinion about screen time or sugar intake, Margaret. You knowingly exposed an immunocompromised child to a virus that could kill her. After we explicitly told you about the danger. After her doctor explained the risks." "I was only doing what I thought was best," she insisted, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. "What you thought was best," James echoed incredulously. "Against all medical advice, against our explicit instructions, you need to leave. Now." A nurse approached, having overheard the escalating conversation. "Is everything okay here?" "No," James answered firmly. "My mother is leaving, and is not to be allowed back without our permission." As security escorted Margaret out, her parting words haunted me. "You'll see I was right. Natural immunity is always better in the long run." I turned back to Lily, watching the antiviral medication drip steadily into her IV line, praying it wasn't already too late. Lily's condition deteriorated rapidly over the next 24 hours. What started as a typical, if uncomfortable, case of chickenpox quickly spiraled as the infection overwhelmed her suppressed immune system. By the second morning, she had developed a persistent cough and increasing difficulty breathing, signs of chickenpox pneumonia, one of the most dangerous complications. As a nurse practitioner, my professional knowledge made the situation even more terrifying. I understood all too well what each new symptom could mean, what each lab value indicated, and just how precarious Lily's condition had become. It was both a blessing and a curse to comprehend the medical terminology the doctors used when they thought they were speaking privately. Varicella pneumonia, immunocompromised host. Consider IV immunoglobulin. Ventilation may become necessary. Each phrase felt like a physical blow, even as I maintained a calm facade for Lily's benefit. James remained stoic through the daylight hours, holding Lily's hand and reading her favorite stories, even as her fever spiked and the spots spread to cover nearly every inch of her small body. But each night, when Lily finally drifted into uneasy sleep, I would find him in the hospital corridor, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. On the third day, a confrontation erupted in the hospital waiting room. Margaret had been attempting to visit daily, sending bouquets of flowers which weren't allowed in the ICU, and texting James constantly for updates. Finally, she arrived with James's father in tow, apparently hoping his presence would force James to allow her access to Lily. I wasn't present for the encounter, but a sympathetic nurse later described how James had stood toe-to-toe with his mother in the family waiting area. "You deliberately endangered my daughter's life," he had said, his voice carrying through the hushed space. "You ignored everything we told you about her condition. You betrayed our trust in the most fundamental way possible." "I was only doing what generations of mothers have done," Margaret had insisted. "Chickenpox parties used to be common. How was I supposed to know her case would be different? We told you. Her doctors told you. You chose not to believe it because you think you know better than everyone. Better than medical science. Better than Lily's own parents." Margaret had apparently turned to her husband for support, but James's father, usually quiet and acquiescent, had simply shaken his head. "Maggie, you went too far this time," he'd said quietly. "The girl could die." That reality hadn't fully penetrated Margaret's consciousness until that moment. According to the nurse, her face had crumpled, but even then she couldn't quite accept responsibility. "I never meant to hurt her," she'd insisted. "I love Lily more than anything." "Love isn't enough," James had responded, his patience finally exhausted. "Not when it's paired with such arrogance. Go home, Mom. You're not welcome here until you can acknowledge what you've done." While this family drama played out in the waiting room, I remained focused solely on Lily. My rage at Margaret simmered beneath the surface, but I couldn't afford to indulge it. Every ounce of my emotional energy was directed toward willing my daughter to fight to breathe, to live. The hospital staff began asking uncomfortable questions about how Lily had been exposed. As a healthcare facility treating an immunocompromised child with a preventable disease, they had protocols to follow. I answered truthfully, watching their expressions shift from professional neutrality to barely concealed horror as I explained Margaret's deliberate actions. "We'll need to document this," the charge nurse said gently. "Child Protective Services may become involved given the circumstances." I nodded numbly. The idea of a CPS investigation would have terrified me under normal circumstances, but compared to the possibility of losing Lily, it barely registered. James and I established a rhythm over the harrowing days that followed, taking shifts at Lily's bedside, barely speaking to each other, except to share medical updates. It wasn't that we were angry with each other. We simply had no emotional resources left for conversation. Every bit of strength was channeled toward Lily and maintaining our own functioning through the crisis. Margaret continued her daily attempts to visit, and James continued turning her away. His torn loyalties had finally crystallized in the face of his daughter's suffering. Whatever complicated love he felt for his mother was superseded by his need to protect Lily. Each doctor's update was a roller coaster of hope and despair. One day, Lily's oxygen levels would improve slightly, giving us reason for cautious optimism. The next, her fever would spike again, or a new blood test would show concerning results. On the fifth night alone during my shift, while James caught a few hours of sleep in the family room, I finally broke down. Lily had briefly regained consciousness earlier, asking in a weak, scratchy voice if she could have ice cream, a small moment of normalcy that had nearly undone me. Now, with her sleeping again, the machines beeping steadily, I allowed myself to collapse into the visitor's chair and weep. "I'm so sorry," I whispered to my sleeping child. "I never should have left you with her. I never should have trusted her. This is my fault." A hand touched my shoulder gently. I looked up to find one of the night nurses, Denise, who had been caring for Lily since admission. "None of that," she said firmly. "This isn't on you. You trusted your child's grandmother to follow basic medical instructions and respect boundaries. That's not unreasonable." "But I knew how she was," I argued, wiping at my tears. "I knew she had these beliefs. I put my career ahead of my daughter's safety." Denise pulled up a chair beside me. "Listen to me. Attending a professional conference isn't putting your career ahead of your daughter. It's being a whole person, which makes you a better mother. What happened here is on your mother-in-law, period." Her certainty helped ease some of the crushing guilt I'd been carrying. We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching Lily's chest rise and fall with each labored breath. "My sister has an autoimmune condition," Denise finally said. "Not the same as Lily's, but similar challenges. Our mother refused to believe it was real for years. Kept trying to fix her with fad diets and supplements." She shook her head at the memory. "Some people just can't accept what doesn't fit their worldview, even when the evidence is right in front of them." That simple understanding that I wasn't alone in dealing with a family member who denied medical reality was strangely comforting. We talked through the rest of that long night, Denise sharing stories of her sister's journey while helping me process my own guilt and anger. By morning, I felt marginally stronger, which was fortunate because Lily faced a critical turning point that day. Her oxygen levels dropped dangerously low, and the medical team debated whether intubation would become necessary. We stood at the precipice, waiting to see which way she would turn, either toward recovery or further decline. I held James's hand tightly as we listened to the pulmonologist explain the risks and benefits of mechanical ventilation, each of us drawing strength from the other. In that moment, despite the horror of the situation, I felt the unbreakable bond between us. Whatever happened with Lily, whatever the fallout with Margaret, James and I would face it together. After 7 harrowing days in intensive care, Lily finally began to stabilize. Her fever broke, her oxygen levels improved, and the worst of the chickenpox lesions started to crust over. The collective relief among the medical team was palpable, though tempered with caution. The pulmonologist, Dr. Chen, requested a follow-up chest CT scan once Lily was strong enough to be transported to radiology. When the results came back, she called James and me into the small consultation room off the pediatric ICU. "I have good news and difficult news," she began, her kind eyes serious behind her glasses. "The good news is that Lily is definitely improving and should be able to leave the ICU in the next day or two. The difficult news is that we're seeing evidence of some scarring in her lungs from the pneumonia." My heart sank as she pulled up the images on her computer screen, pointing out areas of fibrosis in Lily's delicate lung tissue. "What does this mean long-term?" James asked, gripping my hand tightly. "She may have some diminished lung capacity," Dr. Chen explained gently. "Possibly exercise limitations increase susceptibility to respiratory infections. We'll need to monitor her closely with pulmonary function tests as she grows." The words "permanent damage" echoed in my mind, fueling a fresh wave of rage toward Margaret. Not only had she endangered Lily's life, but her actions had now left my daughter with lifelong consequences. James must have been thinking the same thing, because he abruptly stood up. "I need to talk to my mother," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She needs to understand exactly what she's done." I nodded, recognizing his need to confront this head-on. While he went to meet Margaret in the hospital cafeteria, I returned to Lily's bedside, watching her sleep more peacefully than she had in days. James returned an hour later, his face drawn, but somehow lighter, as if a decision had been made. "How did it go?" I asked quietly. "About as well as could be expected," he sighed, sinking into the chair beside me. "She cried, made excuses, said she never meant for this to happen. But she still doesn't fully accept that she did anything wrong. She thinks the doctors are exaggerating the risks and consequences to cover themselves legally." "Does she understand that Lily has permanent lung damage because of her actions?" James ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "She says if that's true, it's probably because of all the harsh medications they gave Lily, not the chickenpox itself." The absurdity of her continued denial would have been laughable if it weren't so tragic. "What did you tell her?" "I gave her an ultimatum," he said firmly. "Either she acknowledges the harm she's done and takes full responsibility, or she loses access to both Lily and me. I can't have someone in our lives who would endanger our daughter and then refuse to even acknowledge it." It was the right decision, but I knew how painful it must have been for James. Despite everything, Margaret was still his mother, and their relationship had been close before Lily's health issues began driving a wedge between them. As expected, Margaret retreated without accepting responsibility. Within days, she had launched a subtle campaign among extended family members, painting herself as misunderstood and overreacting medical professionals as the true villains. The family quickly divided. Some relatives took Margaret's side, suggesting we were being too harsh and should focus on Lily's recovery rather than placing blame. Others, particularly those with medical backgrounds or children of their own, firmly supported our position. The family division added another layer of stress to an already overwhelming situation. Supportive relatives brought meals and offered childcare for when Lily could eventually return home. Others sent passive-aggressive messages about family forgiveness and the importance of grandparents, as if we were simply holding a grudge over a minor transgression. After Lily had been in the hospital for 10 days, James and I had a difficult conversation about pressing charges against Margaret for child endangerment. "I never thought I'd be considering legal action against my own mother," James said, his voice hollow. "But what she did wasn't just misguided, it was criminal." "Are you sure you want to go down this road?" I asked, not because I disagreed, but because I needed to know he was fully prepared for the consequences. "I don't want to," he admitted, "but I think we need to. Not just for Lily, but for any other vulnerable children Margaret might have access to in the future. She genuinely doesn't believe she did anything wrong, which means she could do something like this again." The decision to pursue legal action wasn't made lightly. We consulted with a lawyer who specialized in family law and child endangerment cases, who explained the complexity of proving intentional harm versus misguided decision-making. "The fact that she deliberately arranged the exposure after being explicitly warned about the dangers works in your favor," the lawyer explained. "As does the fact that you have medical professionals who documented the warnings given to her. But these cases are never straightforward, especially when dealing with family members." The police interview that followed was deeply uncomfortable. Margaret continued to minimize her actions, portraying herself as a loving grandmother who simply believed in natural approaches to childhood illnesses. The detective, to his credit, seemed skeptical of her explanations. "So you're saying you didn't understand that chickenpox could be dangerous for an immunocompromised child?" he clarified. "I understood that's what the doctors claimed," Margaret replied, emphasizing the word claimed with obvious skepticism. "But I've raised children and grandchildren for decades, and in my experience, natural immunity is always better in the long run." The Child Protective Services investigation added another layer of stress. Though the caseworker quickly determined that James and I were protective parents who had taken appropriate precautions for Lily's condition, the very fact of being investigated felt like salt in our wounds. The strain on our marriage became increasingly evident as we processed our grief and anger differently. I channeled my emotions into researching legal precedents and connecting with parents of other immunocompromised children who had faced similar situations. James became quieter, spending long hours at Lily's bedside, often just holding her hand while she slept. "Are we okay?" I asked him one night in the dimly lit hospital room, worried about the growing silence between us. He looked up surprised. "Of course we are. Why wouldn't we be? We've barely talked about anything except Lily's medical status and the legal case for days." James reached for my hand. "That's because those are the only things that matter right now. Us, we're solid. If anything, this has shown me how lucky I am to have you as my wife and Lily's mother. I just don't have the emotional bandwidth for deep conversations right now." His simple honesty was reassuring. We were both in survival mode, focusing on Lily's recovery and dealing with the aftermath of Margaret's betrayal. Our relationship would need attention eventually, but for now, just knowing we were on the same team was enough. Margaret's next move took us completely by surprise. She published a lengthy post on social media defending her actions and seeking validation from her online community. The post detailed her belief in natural immunity, portrayed medical professionals as pharmaceutical industry puppets, and positioned herself as a victim of overreaction. "All I did was what mothers have done for generations," she wrote. "Now I'm being treated like a criminal for loving my granddaughter enough to give her lifelong immunity rather than temporary protection from dangerous vaccines." The post quickly circulated beyond her immediate circle, drawing responses from medical professionals who took the opportunity to educate about vaccine-preventable diseases and the special risks to immunocompromised patients. Several doctors and nurses wrote detailed evidence-based responses explaining the potentially fatal consequences of exposing an immunocompromised child to varicella. Rather than convincing others to take her side, Margaret's public defense ended up creating a valuable educational moment that reached far more people than we could have imagined. It also provided additional evidence for our legal case, showing her unapologetic attitude and continued justification of actions that had nearly killed her granddaughter. After 3 grueling weeks in the hospital, Lily was finally deemed stable enough for discharge. The moment should have been purely joyful, but it was tempered by the knowledge that our journey was far from over. Our home was about to be transformed into a recovery space, and our lives would revolve around Lily's healing for months to come. The discharge process was lengthy and involved. The medical team provided detailed instructions for home care medication schedules, warning signs to watch for, and follow-up appointments with various specialists. Lily would need regular pulmonary function tests to monitor her lung capacity, ongoing immunology appointments to manage her underlying condition, and possibly physical therapy to regain strength after her prolonged hospitalization. Bringing Lily home felt surreal. She was noticeably thinner, her vibrant energy diminished by her ordeal. The chickenpox lesions had mostly healed, leaving behind some scarring that the dermatologist assured us would likely fade with time. More concerning was her persistent cough and shortness of breath, with even mild exertion reminders of the lung damage she had sustained. I took family medical leave to care for Lily full-time, a decision that was financially challenging but necessary. Her care regimen was intensive, multiple medications throughout the day, breathing treatments, careful monitoring of symptoms, and a gradual return to normal activities as her strength returned. James increased his workload, taking on extra projects to cover our mounting medical expenses. Despite having good insurance, the deductibles, co-pays, and out-of-network specialists had created a significant financial burden. He would leave before dawn and return late exhausted, but determined to provide for our family during this crisis. The first hearing in our legal case against Margaret occurred 6 weeks after Lily's hospitalization. The courtroom was austere and intimidating, nothing like the dramatic television portrayals. Margaret sat across the aisle with her attorney, avoiding eye contact with us. She looked smaller, somehow less formidable than the woman who had wielded such destructive influence over our lives. Her lawyer argued passionately that Margaret had acted out of misguided love, not malice. "Mrs. Wilson made a serious error in judgment," he acknowledged to the judge, but her actions were motivated by genuine concern for her granddaughter, based on beliefs held by many in her generation. She never intended harm. Our attorney countered with the medical records documenting Lily's condition and the specific warnings Margaret had received. "This wasn't a case of ignorance," she argued. "Mrs. Wilson was explicitly informed about the dangers by both the child's parents and medical professionals. She chose to disregard those warnings based on her personal beliefs, resulting in life-threatening harm and permanent injury to a vulnerable child." The judge's preliminary ruling was that our case had merit to proceed. "The court recognizes that family relationships involve complex emotions and beliefs," she stated. "However, when those beliefs lead to actions that endanger a child, particularly one with documented medical vulnerabilities, there must be accountability." As we left the courthouse, we found reporters waiting outside. The case had attracted media attention, partly due to Margaret's social media posts, and partly because it touched on the ongoing societal tensions around vaccination and parental authority. The spotlight brought both support and unwanted scrutiny. "Do you think the punishment should match the crime?" one reporter called out. "Should a grandmother go to jail for exposing her grandchild to a childhood disease?" We declined to comment following our lawyer's advice, but the questions haunted me. What punishment would be appropriate for what Margaret had done? No consequence could reverse Lily's lung damage or restore our family's broken trust. The media attention had one unexpected benefit. A pulmonary specialist from a prestigious children's hospital reached out after seeing our story, offering to consult on Lily's case at a reduced rate. His evaluation confirmed what we already feared: she had indeed sustained permanent damage to her lungs, though the extent wouldn't be fully known until she was older and could cooperate with more detailed pulmonary function testing. "The good news," he told us gently, "is that children's lungs continue developing until early adolescence. With proper management, she may regain more function than initially predicted." It was a small consolation, but we clung to any positive news we could find. As the weeks passed, James and I struggled with our own complicated emotions. I battled constant guilt, replaying my decision to attend the conference and leave Lily with Margaret. James reassured me repeatedly that the blame lay solely with his mother. "You trusted her because she's family," he would say. "We both did. That's not a failure on our part, it's a betrayal on hers." I knew intellectually that he was right, but emotionally, I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have somehow protected Lily better. The legal case took an unexpected turn when James's father, traditionally quiet and deferential to Margaret's stronger personality, contacted our lawyer to testify about Margaret's history of medical interference. "This isn't the first time," he told us over coffee, looking years older than when we'd last seen him before the incident. "She's always believed she knows better than doctors. When James was 7, he had recurrent strep throat. The doctor wanted to remove his tonsils, but Margaret refused, insisting on herbal remedies instead. James ended up with rheumatic fever that could have damaged his heart." This revelation stunned James, who had no memory of the incident. "Why didn't you stop her?" he asked his father. The older man's shoulders slumped. "I tried, but Margaret was always so certain, so convincing. She made me doubt myself. By the time I realized I needed to intervene, you were already in the hospital." He looked up, his eyes filled with decades of regret. "I won't make that mistake again. Not with Lily." His testimony strengthened our case considerably, establishing a pattern of behavior rather than an isolated incident. Even more damaging to Margaret's defense was the discovery of her membership in several anti-vaccination social media groups and her communications about her plans for Lily's chickenpox party. "Natural immunity boot camp for my granddaughter this weekend," she had written in one private group. "Mom doesn't know Dad's at work, and I'm taking matters into my own hands." The responses had encouraged her, with other members applauding her brave stand against Big Pharma and offering advice on how to ensure Lily contracted the virus. Not one person in the group had questioned whether this was appropriate or asked about Lily's health status. The turning point in the case came when Margaret's friend Ellen, whose grandchildren had been the source of Lily's chickenpox exposure, admitted during her deposition that she knew about Lily's condition. "Margaret told me the child had some health problems," Ellen testified reluctantly. "But she said the doctors were overreacting and that chickenpox would actually help strengthen Lily's immune system." "And did you express any concern about exposing an immunocompromised child to chickenpox?" our lawyer asked. Ellen shifted uncomfortably. "I suggested maybe she should check with Lily's parents first. Margaret said they were too influenced by mainstream medicine to make rational decisions." With this testimony, Margaret's defense began to crumble. Her lawyer approached us about a potential settlement, but we were determined to see the case through to its conclusion. This wasn't about financial compensation, it was about establishing a legal precedent that might protect other vulnerable children from well-meaning but dangerous family members. The final courtroom confrontation was both exhausting and cathartic. Margaret took the stand, and for the first time seemed to truly understand the gravity of what she had done. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, including her own documented statements, the medical records detailing Lily's near-death experience, and the testimony from multiple witnesses, her certainty finally wavered. "I never wanted to hurt Lily," she said, her voice breaking. "I love her more than anything. I truly believed I was doing what was best for her." "Despite specific warnings from medical professionals?" the prosecutor asked. Margaret hesitated. "I didn't trust them. I believed I knew better." "And now," the prosecutor pressed, "having seen the consequences of your actions, do you still believe you knew better?" For the first time, Margaret looked directly at James and me, her expression crumpling with genuine remorse. "No," she whispered. "I was wrong. So terribly wrong." It wasn't a dramatic courtroom revelation like in the movies. There were no gasps from the gallery or pounding gavels. Just a quiet, belated acknowledgement of responsibility that came too late to prevent harm, but might be the first step towards some kind of resolution. The court's ruling came 3 months after Lily's hospitalization. Margaret was found liable for child endangerment. The judge's sentencing reflected the complexity of the case. A restraining order, preventing unsupervised contact with Lily, mandatory education about immunocompromised patients, and vaccine-preventable diseases, and financial restitution for Lily's medical costs. The court recognizes that Mrs. Wilson did not intend to cause serious harm, the judge stated during sentencing. However, intention does not negate responsibility, particularly when clear warnings were provided and deliberately ignored. The consequences of Mrs. Wilson's actions will affect her granddaughter for the rest of her life. As we left the courtroom, James and I shared mixed feelings about the outcome. There was a sense of justice being served, of society acknowledging the wrong that had been done to our daughter. But there were no real winners here. Our family remained fractured, Lily's health permanently affected, and the path forward unclear. "What happens now?" I asked James as we drove home from the courthouse. He sighed deeply. "Now we focus on Lily, on helping her recover as fully as possible, on giving her the most normal childhood we can, despite everything." Lily's recovery continued gradually. By 6 months after the hospitalization, she had regained much of her energy and spirit. Her breathing improved, though she still tired more easily than before, and needed an inhaler before physical activities. Her infectious laugh, which we had feared might be permanently affected by the lung damage, returned in full force, brightening our home once more. We established a new normal, adapting to Lily's needs while trying not to be overprotective. It was a delicate balance, wanting to shield her from further harm while allowing her the freedom to be a child. We enrolled her in a small private school with an excellent nurse on staff and strict vaccination requirements for students. We found activities, swimming lessons instead of running intensive sports art classes, instead of dance that she could enjoy without taxing her lungs. Throughout this adjustment period, James and I realized we needed professional help to process our own trauma. We began attending family therapy sessions both individually and together, working through the complicated emotions the past months had generated. "I'm still so angry," I admitted during one session. Not just at Margaret, but at myself, at the unfairness of it all. Lily didn't deserve any of this. "Anger is a natural response to injustice," our therapist assured me. "The question is, how do you want to channel that anger? How can you transform it into something constructive?" That question led me on a journey from anger to focused determination. I couldn't change what had happened to Lily, but I could use our experience to help prevent similar situations for other families. I began connecting with parents of immunocompromised children, sharing resources and support strategies. Eventually, this evolved into a formal support group that met monthly at the hospital where I worked. James, too, found constructive ways to cope with his complex emotions. The breach with his mother had reopened his relationship with his father, who had been a shadowy figure throughout much of his adult life. Now they began rebuilding their connection, finding common ground in their shared love for Lily and commitment to her well-being. "Dad's different without Mom dominating every conversation," James observed after his father had visited for dinner. "More thoughtful, more present. I never really knew him before." This new relationship with his father provided some healing for the loss of his mother's presence in our lives. It wasn't a replacement, but it offered a glimpse of what healthy family dynamics could look like. As for Margaret, her court-mandated education program seemed to be making a genuine impact. 6 months after the sentencing, we received a letter from her, a handwritten 12-page outpouring of remorse and reflection. "I cannot undo the harm I've caused," she wrote. "No words can repair Lily's lungs or restore your trust in me. I've spent these months learning about immunocompromised patients, about the difference between a healthy child contracting chickenpox and what happens when a child like Lily is exposed. I understand now that I placed my own beliefs above Lily's safety, above medical science, and above your rights as her parents. I was wrong on every level, and I will carry that knowledge for the rest of my life." The letter continued detailing what she had learned, acknowledging each mistake she had made, and expressing hope that someday we might find a way forward as a family, while respecting that such reconciliation would be entirely on our terms, if ever. James and I read the letter together after Lily had gone to bed, sitting in silence for a long time afterward. "Do you think she means it?" I finally asked. "I think so," James said slowly. "It's the first time I've heard her take full responsibility without excuses or deflection." "Does that change anything for you?" He considered carefully. "Not immediately. I'm not ready to have her back in our lives, not yet. Maybe not for a very long time, but it helps to know that she finally understands what she did." We decided to take our time considering whether to allow any future contact. The restraining order would eventually expire, but our caution would not. Any potential relationship would need to be carefully structured, supervised, and conditional on Margaret's continued acknowledgement of boundaries and respect for our parenting decisions. Meanwhile, Lily continued to surprise us with her resilience. Children adapt to adversity in ways adults often cannot, finding joy and wonder even in the aftermath of trauma. She had questions, of course. Why couldn't she see Grandma anymore? Why did she need more medicines than her friends? Why did she get tired faster when running at recess? We answered each question honestly in age-appropriate ways. Grandma made a choice that hurt you because she didn't listen to the doctors. We explained. She's learning about why that was wrong. Maybe someday when she's learned enough, you can see her again. But right now, we need to focus on keeping you healthy. Lily seemed to accept these explanations with the straightforward practicality of childhood. Her main concerns were more immediate. Will she be well enough for the class field trip? Can she have a playdate with her new friend from school? Will her favorite stuffed unicorn fit in her backpack, along with her inhaler? As we approached the 1-year anniversary of the chickenpox incident, I found myself reflecting on all we had learned. The importance of boundaries, especially with family. The fact that love, even when genuine, isn't always enough if it isn't paired with respect and understanding. The recognition that protecting our children sometimes means making painful decisions about who can be in their lives. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts as a parent. That initial uneasiness I felt leaving Lily with Margaret hadn't been paranoia. It had been my subconscious recognizing a potential threat that my conscious mind wasn't ready to acknowledge. I promised myself I would never again ignore that internal warning system, no matter how inconvenient or socially uncomfortable the consequences might be. Lily continues to make progress. Her last pulmonary function test showed improvement, and her immunologist is cautiously optimistic about her long-term prognosis. She still has challenges, still requires more medical care than most children her age, but her spirit remains unbroken. If anything, she has developed a compassion and emotional intelligence beyond her years, noticing when classmates are struggling and offering comfort with an innate understanding of suffering that most 6-year-olds haven't yet acquired. As for our family relationships, we continue to move forward one careful step at a time. James and his father have developed a genuine friendship with weekly fishing trips and regular family dinners. We've established connections with other extended family members who respect our boundaries and understand the gravity of what occurred. Regarding Margaret, we've begun allowing limited supervised contact brief video calls where we can monitor all interactions. It's a tentative beginning with strict parameters and no guarantees of progression. Trust, once broken so fundamentally, can only be rebuilt with consistent effort and genuine change over time. Through it all, we've maintained our focus on what matters most: Lily's well-being and our family's healing. The road hasn't been easy, and we have many challenges still ahead. But we face them together stronger for having weathered the worst storm of our lives. If our story has any lesson to offer, it's this: love without respect isn't enough. Good intentions without proper information can be dangerous. And sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones we need most desperately. Trust your instincts, advocate fiercely for your children, and remember that family is defined not by blood, but by those who truly have your best interests at heart. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who didn't respect your parenting decisions? How did you handle it? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more real-life family stories that offer insights and lessons. Thank you for listening, and I wish you wisdom and courage in your own family journeys.